NFL DFS Week 8 lineup advice Q&A for FanDuel, DraftKings, and Yahoo. I'm your host, Moose, at CFB_Moose is where you can find me. We're from OccupyFantasy.com, at OccupyFantasy on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the social media platforms. We are on it. Again, I'm Moose, co-founder and data guru here at Occupy Fantasy. I'm joined by Brian, co-founder and CEO of Occupy Fantasy, at Brian Jester FF on Twitter is where you can find him. How's it going, man?
What's up, Moose? Just enjoying some daytime UFC and building some NFL lineups along the way. It's been pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. Always fun to see, for those who aren't watching UFC, like that one referee actually, I'm pretty sure he just got fired. Like midway
Like
through
on
the
the
shift.
spot.
Yeah. Just refused to do anything. Pretty sure it was a fixed fight, but
Midway through his shift, like it was an actual job.
crazy. So, but here we're not here to talk about crazy UFC fights. We're here to talk about some crazy NFL DFS. So we're here until 2:30. If you have any questions, go ahead, hit them up in the chat. If you're watching this on replay and you have questions, go ahead and comment down below. We'll get your answers. Or if you want to be in our Discord, you can go ahead and check that out as well. OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. So, Brian, let's just jump right into it. We were talking about it beforehand. I think this is a little bit easier slate than what we've had in the last couple of weeks. We also talked about some things on our $1 Million Mission. But overall, what's your first couple thoughts on the slate?
First thought is it's kind of eerily similar to last week's slate where we had 3 double-digit favorites, right? Last week we had Tampa Bay and we had LA and we had, what was the third big favorite last week? Arizona, right?
Yeah.
And then this week we have LA again, and then we have Buffalo, and then we have Cincinnati, who's now a 10-point favorite, 10.5-point favorite. So it makes it interesting with all the discussion around 3-0 stacks and 3-1 stacks and whatnot. There's some chalk in some spots that I'm not surprised. There's in some spots that I'm, a little taken aback by. And the running backs aren't that great once again this week. So it's a really, really interesting slate.
Yeah, and I noticed that even though there are chalk, and I'm looking at some of the ownership projections in our Occupy model, I haven't built too much. Brian, you can probably prove me if I'm wrong here, but I feel like looking at the pricing, it looks a little bit easier to build some lineups this week. I know last week it was kind of tough with Kansas City as being a chalk and one of our recommended game stacks, but it seems to be a lot easier this week building lineups.
For sure. And as I've actually built most of my lineups so far, and last week it literally took me like 5 hours to build lineups. Nothing was working right, and it's kind of all what you were saying, especially the Kansas City stacks being so expensive. This week, not as bad, not nearly as bad, and kind of first runs, no error messages. So yeah, I do think it is easier to build this week for sure.
Definitely. Got some questions here. What's up, Ed? He says, is Uzoma a lock, like 2.5 good tight ends? I don't think I ever play Uzoma, but
he has 5 touchdowns on 19 targets this year. He's like 50th in targets and near the top in touchdowns. So yeah, Uzoma's got some regression coming pretty shortly. I would not be playing him.
Yeah, exactly.
As he scores 2 touchdowns again this week.
I know. So, but as a chalk, again, going back to the 3-0 game stacks, 3-1 game stacks, I could see playing him in a stack. You could do something like a Burrow, Chase, Uzoma. I don't know. He would run it backwards, but
prime 3-0 stack, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I guess. So Corey Davis is out for the Jets. Jameson Crowder, more targets funneled to him. Or Chris and I were talking before the show about Michael Carter, who got a surprisingly big workload last week without Tevin Coleman. Tevin Coleman's out again this week, so maybe Michael Carter's that guy. But again, that's probably the type of stack you want to 3-0 if you decide to go that route.
Exactly, yeah. I prefer not to play created players' names as my run back. But
yeah, that's fair.
Here from Matthew, he says, who's your favorite stack and who do you like on the Philly stack?
Great question. So Matthew, my personal favorite stack is Carolina and Atlanta. I think Chris highlighted the Carolina side in the stack section of the plug. Tampa Bay, New Orleans is a close second. Maybe that's first, the Tampa Bay side especially. And then the Philly stack, I think it's pretty nice because we have Devonta Smith dominating air yards, Dallas Goedert, whole new role without Zach Ertz. Those are the two clear guys to target on Philly side, and then you can run that back with DeAndre Swift, probably just the safest bet.
Exactly, yeah. Now, I know we talked about it last week with Philly being a cheap stack, and Quez and Jalen Rager being just 1%. So if you want to get super tricky and you wanted to go down from Smith or the tight end, you can go down to Quez. I probably wouldn't do that, but again, 13% ownership compared to 1% ownership. If you want to get different, you can that way.
And I'm including him in my 150. And we didn't even mention Gainwell there, who should get a slight bump in usage with Miles Sanders out, but Boston Scott, Jordan Howard to, for whatever reason, give him touches. So I don't know if we'll see a massive bump in Gainwell's usage, even though his ownership reflects that people think he will get a huge bump.
Yeah, that's also a good thing there. So there's a lot of different ways you could take that Philly stack, which I don't know if that's a good thing or bad thing, Brian.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's definitely hit or miss for sure.
Definitely. Really good question here from DotBet. So for a 20 max contest, would you go 100% cup or completely fade?
I'm always on the fade side, and we've seen how that's worked out. But I will say, Moose, we've seen, I guess, well, how big are the 20 max contests, right? They're like, most of them are like hundreds of thousands of players, right? If I'm not mistaken, Moose?
Yeah.
Yeah, so DotBet's, let me know if that's incorrect, right? Maybe you're playing a smaller 20 max. But we don't see much leverage in going over the field on chalk receivers in the large field contest, where we see the leverage is in the smaller contest, right?
I think you're the exact opposite on that.
No, I'm almost positive it's from 100, 200 player leagues, 5,000 players or less, where it's kind of the top 1% finish rate versus the field rate is kind of similar for chalk receivers in large field.
I'm gonna have to go back on that one really quick. Let me see if I can pull this.
Okay.
Up. Yeah.
I'll answer these questions while you pull it up.
Yeah, go answer those questions.
All right. Hawk Dark says thoughts on Callaway as a bring back for a Brady 3-1. Yeah, I think he's probably one of the best bets there. The safest bet for volume. Kenny Stills and Traquan Smith are splitting work as the wide receiver 2 there. Yeah, I'll say Callaway is the best bet. Assuming you can't get up to Kamara, you need a cheap piece. Yeah, I'll say Callaway.
Okay. I was gonna say I have the day we talked about the $1 million mission on Tuesday. So in the Millie, the field used a chalk wide receiver 61% of the time. The top 0.1% did it 73% of the time.
Okay.
And that King of the Beach qualifier was 67 to 69, so no real difference. And then in your WWFC, the 5,000 player contest, was 67 to 74% between the field and the top 0.1%.
Oh, okay. So it's positive leverage for everything but small contests. So I was very incorrect. So thank you for pointing that out, Moose. God, dude. I guess I would go 100, right? I guess if that's their choice, I would go 100, just because his usage is out of control.
Yeah, because like if you have to think about it also from the sense of like whichever way you go, like you need. I know it's binary outcome. Like if you go 100% and he crushes, you have a chance. If you go 100% and he doesn't crush, you still have a chance potentially. But if you go 0 and he does anything, like you could get hurt really quickly.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I'll lean towards 100% there, not bets.
Yeah. Let's see here. Ed says, with Moore and Anderson underperforming, how can Darnold not crush? Because Darnold sucks.
Well, the reason they're underperforming is because of Sam Darnold. So that's that answers your question in the question.
Yeah. John says, starting Calvin Ridley or Joe Mixon at a flex spot.
John, is that DFS? Is that season long? If it's DFS, let us know what site and contest type. And there's a lot of factors into this player or this player, but try to contextualize a little bit. We'll try to help you.
Swaggy P says Godwin is looking glorious this weekend, and Arthur Juan lock button.
Yeah, AJ Brown without Julio Jones again. AJ Brown's been getting the volume. Assuming he can stay off that Chipotle diet, he's got a good shot of hitting 100 yards. I like it. I like both those guys.
Definitely. PY says thanks for the content. Appreciate that. Always love to see it. Blue says as hot Tampa Bay has been, the Saints defense will not allow Tampa to score 40 points in them. Saints defense is no joke.
Yeah, and I think the betting markets agree with that, right? It's the reason Tampa Bay's team total isn't above 30 for the first time in a couple of weeks. So, yeah, I think that's fair. But, again, 28 points, or if they exceed that and go 30, 33, 34, 35 points, that's certainly enough for a game stack to get there.
Yeah. Chris here in the chat speaking back to that Cooper Cup thing. What's your thought process on going like 2x Cup if he's 15, 20%? You go 20-40% on
I
him to
like
get
that.
some
I mean,
leverage.
yeah, that's still leverage, right? And I think that's probably the better move because there are some other receivers I like in that range, or I like some other receivers just in general. So yeah, I think 100% is probably extreme, but you go 40%, that's 8 of your 20 lineups, and I think that's
Mhm.
leverage enough.
Yeah, 'cause I was building some 150 yesterday, the day before, and stuff like that. You and I were talking. I did again, it was for 150, but I did a min one chalk wide receiver, and I think I ended up with like 1.7 leverage on Cup, and like 1.5 to 2% on all those other chalk wide receivers. I'm like, I actually kind of like this allocation here.
Yeah, it's not that bad. That's a pretty decent idea, especially if we think that chalk wide receiver meta is changing. So I like that. I think so. To go back to that point, I think 2 times leverage on those receivers, if you can get there, is probably the best move.
Cool, cool. Awesome. So, yeah, keep the questions coming. Always love to answer these questions. But let's talk about some of the game stacks that Chris wrote up in the daily plug that you can check out at occupyfantasy.com. Scrolling down here, we did talk about the Tampa Bay New Orleans one already. Do you have any last lingering thoughts you want to put on that before you go to the next one?
No, just Kenny Stills is still being used pretty heavily. Had 100 air yards on 3 targets last week. So if you're looking for a very cheap Curtis Samuel piece, he's your guy.
Cool, cool, cool. Next game stack that Chris wrote up that is very sneaky. Betting markets are like interesting on this one, but it's that Tennessee at Indianapolis game. I've always struggled with Tennessee just because they have so many good players. It seems like they spread the ball around a lot with Derrick Henry, AJ Brown, even sometimes Nick Westbrook and King. If you want to go that far deep, but what's your thoughts on this game stack, Brian?
It's just it's tough for me, and every metric points to making it a game stack, right? All the metrics we look at. But if you figure that they just give Henry 30 carries and Jonathan Taylor 20 plus touches, like it's just tough for a 3x1 to get there, even a 2x1 in some sense, right? Especially if the volume's so concentrated. So
Mm-hmm.
I get it, and this is the second divisional matchup. We're in hashtag second divisional matchup season now, week 8. Tennessee and Indy, Buffalo and Miami. We see historically quarterback performance drop by about 10% in the second matchup of a divisional game, just because familiarity and whatnot. So we have 2 games like that with Buffalo, Miami, Tennessee, and Indianapolis. So I'm that if it's a tiebreaker, I'll use that to shy away from it. So I'm a little nervous about that aspect.
Okay, yeah, I completely forgot that was a second divisional matchup here. Ed says, "How about a mini stack with Cup and Henderson?"
Yeah, I think that's fine too, right? Like at least the rules I've been making, if I'm not fully stacking these large favorites like the Rams, like Buffalo, normally I only have 1 player max per team outside of my stacks. But the past 2 weeks when we have these large favorites and I'm not stacking, I'll do a max of 2. So I'll allow 2 guys from the same team as long as their team total is 30 or more outside of my stack. So Henderson and Cup would qualify.
That makes sense. I can see that. And Ed also says, in a Colts stack is your Curtis Samuel from the Colts or the Titans.
Ooh, great question. God, they're also bad.
What do you
Jesus
think?
Christ, dude.
What do you think about it from this way? So we talked about Tennessee. Can spread the ball around Henry, Brown, whoever. What if you just took your stand again? I'm assuming if you're making just one lineup or just a handful of lineups, you stack the Colts because again that's awesome that you're a Colts fan, so you get to root for the fanalytics part, and then you just pick a player you think's going to get the majority of the share, Henry or Brown, and hope that person gets the majority of the concentrated workload, and just take the stand there.
That's fine too, I think. Yeah, it's just, I mean, there's just such thin volume outside of the main guys that it makes a Curtis Samuel piece very tough. Like, I guess probably one of the tight ends, right? Ferkser or Mo Alley Cox. The other one I'm thinking is with Julio out, Marcus Johnson or Nick Westbrook Keenum. But again, it's hard to pin down which one. Marcus Johnson was the direct replacement when Julio missed a couple of weeks ago, so I would probably lean him. But none of those feel great, so it's tough.
Yeah, the moment I completely forgot he was talking about Curtis Samuel. I'm like, yeah, just jam Derrick Henry and you're fine. Just pick the most expensive player in the entire slate, make him your cheap piece.
Yeah.
And then what percent is chalk in the main slate? I'm guessing we're talking about the chalk wide receivers. We look at 15% or greater.
Yeah, that's kind of what we consider chalk for a wide receiver on a main slate.
definitely. So, and if we scroll down here, the next thing, the last game that Chris wrote about was that New England and Chargers game stack, which definitely something you got to watch out for because Eckler was added to the injury report late and is questionable for the game. What's your thoughts on this one, Brian?
I like it, especially on FanDuel. The pricing is a little bit better there. I really like it. I like the New England tight ends a ton this week. If you look at what the Chargers defense allows and what they don't allow, you know, Hunter Henry and even to a lesser extent Jonnu Smith, great options. Obviously, all the the high end weapons on the Chargers side. I do like this game a lot. I think I definitely like the Chargers side the best and running it back with the New England tight end. But if you want to get frisky and high risk, like I think you can in large field, you can certainly run the Mac Jones side as well.
Let's go. I always love to see it. It seems like Mac Jones either like really bad or just average. So
Yeah.
you definitely
There's not that ceiling there you're looking for, but yeah.
very
Fortunately,
hard.
he's super cheap, and all of his pieces are super cheap. And if you play that side of the stack and you run it back with Eckler or Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, then you can fit in Cooper Kupp. You can fit in whatever other expensive players you want outside the stack.
Yep, exactly. It makes sense. There was actually one other side I wanted to talk about that wasn't mentioned as a game stack is the Denver side of the Denver Washington game. You know, the model for some reason is all over Denver.
Yes, dude.
For a lot of reasons, and so I think that actually might be one of the sides where I'm not game stacking. I'm just 3-1 stacking the Denver side and using that in X% of my lineups.
Yeah, the model is all over that game. And the betting markets are too. The total's now up 1.5 since lines opened, and that's tied with Tennessee and India as the largest total move since the beginning of the week. So the model's all about it. And so Teddy Bridgewater, cheap, gets Jerry Jeudy back, I think. Cortland Sutton, Noah Fant, all these guys pop in the model. So I see it. I totally see it. And then you can run it back with Terry McLaurin. Maybe Ricky Seals-Jones if you're not using Fant. So, it's on my short list of stacks to consider. And if again, on a week where there's not a ton of super clear stacks, I think if you find one that you like that fits really well with your lineup, I think you can go for it.
I mean, how can you not play Scary Terry on Halloween?
That's a good point. Haven't really thought about that, but that's a great point.
Yeah, exactly. Matthew says, what's your thoughts on Goddard and Hawkinson using 2 tight ends this week?
I liked it last week, and I still didn't do it, even though I probably should have with Pitts and Gesicki. Hawkinson and Goddard aren't necessarily being used as much as wide receivers. I guess you could do it, but I think there's only rare cases where you want to do it. Kelsey Waller type guys, Gesicki and Pitts, guys who are, tight end by label, but not necessarily usage. I don't think that qualifies for those 2 guys. They're used in line too much. I lean towards no.
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially with someone like Hawkinson. Cool. So we talked about the game stacks. I do want to just bring up the Occupy model really quick on the quarterbacks model. Look at some of this team total moves, as you can see on the screen here. This ranks every quarterback using our proprietary matchers to come up with the Occupy Fantasy Index. And we have it sorted by team total move. Only 2 teams have a team total move of 1 or greater. Indy up 3.25 points, which is just absolutely bonkers to think about.
Yeah, why did that get? Well, the spread move was a big reason there. Why did the spread move so much? Was this the bad opener or what? Do you know?
I think it was just a bad opener, honestly. That's what I had to guess.
Either way, the total is up though. So if you like that game, go for it.
Yep. And then Denver is the only other team with a team total move of 1 point or greater.
But we do have New England, the Chargers, Falcons, these teams we like as positive team total moves as well. And then the big favorites, Buffalo and Cincinnati, have it too, a half point.
Yeah, which is interesting. I don't know how I feel about. I want to include Cincinnati just because Fanalytics, but I think they're actually they could be a good one-sided 3-0 stack this week or 2-0 stack.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so
I can see that.
We flip it to the other side. Tennessee's team total down 1.25. The Jets down -1. Pitt -7.75, and then a handful of teams minus a half a point.
Yep. So none of these teams are really stacking outside the Tennessee potentially, but I think again that goes back to that spread move that kind of distorts that a little bit. So
Yep. Ed says, "Who's your highest exposed guy that makes you want to puke?"
Oh, I'm playing some cheaper running backs this week. I'm trying out playing more expensive receivers, and so I have some Michael Carter. I have some David Johnson for you, Miles Gaskin. I got some gross ones, and 20-25% exposure to each of those guys, which I think should certainly qualify for that.
Oof.
Yeah, yeah, I know. Well, again, it goes back to showing how bad running back is recently,
Yeah.
right? There's not a ton of great guys that we want to pay up for, so.
Yeah, definitely. Hot Dark says the Jets D rank 4th in the model. Yeah, and again, this is based off ceiling, so it's saying that
For their price.
yeah, for their price, Jets have an ability to reach a ceiling. Like their ability to reach a ceiling at their price is 4th highest.
Right. Again, what's their price most? 2,100 or something, right?
2,200 on DraftKings, 3K on FanDuel.
Yeah, so they're incredibly cheap. So I definitely see it. They can get after the quarterback some too. So I definitely see the models ranking there.
Definitely. Yeah, and just to round it off, I know we talked about Pittsburgh having one of the worst team total moves. Cleveland is actually number 1 in the defense model on DraftKings, and I think on FanDuel as well.
Anytime
no,
you
on DraftKings.
Anytime you can play against Big Ben, I think it's a pretty good move.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you want to pull up the wide receiver model and sort by ownership or roster rate, whatever we want to call it, and just discuss some of these chalk guys and see what we want to do with them?
Exactly. Yeah. So pulling up the Occupy model for wide receivers here, sorting by DraftKings ownership, and again we talked about chalk being 15. I can just, for the sake of argument, I'll just make this the slider 15. So we have 6 people who fit this: Chris Godwin, Cooper Kupp, Calvin Ridley, Jamar Chase, Brandon Cooks, and Michael Pittman Jr.
All right, so if we're thinking about good ones, right? It's Godwin and Kupp who have actually put it together, and Chase, right? Those 3 have had production plus opportunity. Ridley's had the opportunity, not necessarily the production so far. Cooks is on maybe the worst team in history. And Michael Pittman, I don't think anyone would qualify as an alpha receiver, even though his usage kind of shows it is a little bit. So for me, most of, like, if we're trying to go over guys, it's definitely Godwin, Kupp, and Chase. Ridley, I'm going to, because I'm stacking that game. I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so Godwin, Kupp, Chase, like you said, they're actually getting production. So I could see one-offing them or even doing them as a mini stack outside of your primary stack. Ridley doesn't seem like to be popping off to me. If you're game stacking that game, I feel like with Ridley and Pittman, if you're game stacking that game, you should definitely have a lot of them, and that's how you get your leverage on that.
Right.
Cooks, like, Houston just sucks. I don't think I'll ever play a player from Houston ever again. I mean, how odd is it to see a chalk wide receiver with a team total of 16.25?
Right. And he is an underperforming receiver, so we'll give him credit there. But right, team total of 16 on a team that's not even really trying. So
yeah,
I mean, if there's one guy that I would go under on, it's probably Cooks, just because of that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at 5,700 on DraftKings, 6K on FanDuel, he is the cheapest of this on FanDuel. So I guess if you need to save some salary somewhere, I guess you can fit him in that way.
Yeah, because he is cheap, right? And then that's definitely part of the reason his volume versus salary is mismatched. But
yeah, but like I said, on DraftKings, if you're thinking about making one lineup, I mean, I would easily put Pittman at $400 cheaper than Cooks.
Probably, just based on everything we know. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of crazy to me. But speaking of wide receivers, there's one player that stood toward the top of the model that has a really, really high ranking that I want to talk about, and good old DJ Moore.
Yes, top underperforming wide receiver this week. His ownership is mouthwatering on DraftKings at 7%, because we don't really get a price discount despite him not performing well the last couple of weeks. Dude, I'm all over it. Absolutely all over it. I absolutely love that play. And again, his OF index is like 11 points higher than Kupp's, the next closest. So it's crazy.
Yeah, which is nuts because when we were running the preliminary OF indexes, and you and I were talking, we were watching the model do its magic. We're like, oh wow, it actually tied. It has the same OF index as Kupp. And then when it finished, it like DJ Moore kept slowly creeping up the leaderboard. We're like, holy shit, he's gonna be number 1. Let's go. And underperforming wide receiver, boom. Cannot wait to play.
Yes.
Yep.
Exactly. I can't wait.
Definitely. So I got some questions over here. Let's see. From Ed, Johnson's traded. You like his new role after 4 days of practice?
Johnson wasn't traded. Mark Ingram was traded. David Johnson is still the running back in Houston, so he should have an expanded role.
Rams defense is overrated, so I can see Cooks going off with Taylor back at quarterback. I think Mills is still the starter, right?
Yeah, Mills is still starting once again this week for everyone who has to be subjected to
that. Sean has a good question here. It says, how would you build for single entry GPPs?
Yeah, I would build exactly how we outlined in our strategy guide. Nothing changes from that. So if you need the link, I can put it in the chat for you guys.
Swaggy is saying Higgins and Pittman over Cooks. Yeah, I think a lot of people are just going to say like literally anybody over Cooks. It's hard. It's very hard to
except the field. Apparently, the field 15% is they're picking Cooks over a lot of people.
I guess, yeah.
But I do like Higgins this week, underperforming wide receiver as well.
Yep. Hot Dark says, what's your thoughts on D Harris?
I assume Damian. I'd get behind him some. I guess you could play him, especially in game stat. I don't know, man. That is one of the weaknesses of the Chargers defense, right? They let people run the ball on them. So I could see Damian Harris having a day.
Okay. Doppa says, are you going to have any exposure to the Buffalo-Miami stack?
I will not. This is also the second matchup between these two teams. Hasn't mattered for Josh Allen in the past, but we try not to look at individual player performance versus teams. He's done pretty well against Miami in second divisional matchups. But again, this is the second divisional matchup. There are other games on the slate. I know the model likes it a lot. I think you just get your exposure to some of the receivers in that game, especially on the Buffalo side, and instead of fully stacking it.
Okay. Sean says, so is it considered low risk then, or are we building high risk for single entry? It would be high risk, Sean.
Yeah, so low risk it's described in the Ultimate Guide, which if you haven't read, definitely check it out. But low risk is half the field gets paid, no incremental payouts. High risk is 20% or less get paid. Top heavy payouts you want to build to get first place.
Yep, definitely. Cool. So we're here for 3 more minutes. So if you have any last lingering questions, definitely go ahead and ask. Again, if you like the video and you're new here, go ahead and hit that like button, the thumbs up, hit the subscribe, and bell notification. Be notified of when we go live. Again, we're also posting various videos throughout the week from our NFL writer Chris Rooney. Some positional breakdowns; those are always a fantastic watch. We also have our Discord as well, occupyfantasy.com/Discord. Go ahead and check that out as well. Brian, do you have any last lingering thoughts for the last minute or so?
Not really. I think it's, again, surprisingly a very similar slate to last week. Try to get your exposure to the high team total teams where you can, but I do like a lot of the other closer game stacks. Closer meaning closer in spread stacks. So yeah, it's interesting to try to, again, what we discovered last week and on the $1 Million Mission wasn't too much different from what we've already known. Just maybe a little more emphasis on wide receiver than running back. High volume receiver versus high volume running back. I think it's maybe the one change we're considering. But overall, pretty good week, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I cannot wait. Again, I'm still figuring out my strategy for tomorrow, but I feel confident. I feel really good about my process.
Me too. So again, if you guys have questions, we'll be in the Discord the rest of the afternoon, and especially tomorrow. Chris goes live tomorrow on Twitter at 11 a.m. taking your questions. So we didn't answer it here, but we certainly can answer it elsewhere.
Yeah. So last question here from Dot Bets: are you stacking the Philly-Detroit game more on the Philly side?
I'm a maniac. I'm stacking both sides equally. So that means 16% exposure to Jared Goff stacks in my 150. Probably gonna be at the bankruptcy hearing, but if they go off, we're winning the Millie tomorrow.
And he says Chuba top running back in the model. What's your thoughts on him this week?
I'm not a huge fan, honestly, given the fact that
he sucks.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trusting the model a little bit, and I'm using them in game stacks. I think he has some touchdown equity, so I see what the model's thinking there.
Cool. So, all right, everyone, that'll do it. Moose and Brian here from OccupyFantasy.com. Until next time, have a good one.
Good luck.